Soviet Union with this gentleman in charge, having won the battle with Stalin, the soft guy, do you think with a happier populace and less terrorized populace, he could have stood against the Nazi war machine? There's this theory that only a brutalized population could have gone through the hell the Soviets went through, which was to our benefit.
We organized a conference on Stalin in Moscow 2 Christmases back, and there were defenders and detractors. And the defenders had only that to argue. Without the iron fist, we could not have beaten Hitler. And if you look at the military tactics, if you retreated, they shot you. And so many people say, had they not shot those retreating, they would have lost to Hitler. I look at it quite differently because the Soviet Union very nearly lost World War II in the first few months. When Stalin had thought he had the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty, he did not allow his generals to marshal the troops at the front. He was a very terrible general himself. After the attack, he thought that the Politburo was coming to arrest him. So that was the point where he realized he'd really made a bad mistake. So my argument is they won despite Stalin, not because of that. There's yes. Oh yes, and he had, that's another point. Well, it's a part of this question. I should have answered that as well. In addition, in 1937, he executed the top generals because he feared that they were more popular than he. So the Soviet troops went into the field led by majors instead of being led by generals. So I think that is relevant.
Hello, I'm George Rehrman. I acquired a book one time that said it claimed to be an autobiography. Did Stalin ever write an autobiography? Okay. Is there any evidence that he had Lenin poisoned?
Yes.
Very good.
It seems strange that Stalin would poison Lenin because Lenin was near death. But Lenin had left behind a testament that said, whatever you do, get rid of Stalin. But he also said, everyone else is incompetent. I'm the only one who's really capable of leading the country. So Stalin had a great fear that somehow Lenin would rise from his deathbed and appear at a party congress and say, let's get rid of Stalin. So there is, and Stalin's wife was Lenin's nurse. So there is some circumstantial evidence.
You said Saddam Hussein used Stalin as a model for his reform rule. Well, who did Stalin use as a model? Where did he learn all of his things? And secondly, how did Stalin die?
Well, you can go back to ancient Rome. I don't think Stalin read very much about that. Stalin did read a lot. He read Machiavelli. But I think Stalin wrote the book, to tell the truth, wrote the textbook. How did Stalin die? He died in March '53 from a stroke. He died at his dacha, which was actually a mansion. He rolled out of his bed and was lying on the floor, was discovered the next day. The high party officials were called in. They didn't know what to do, they were afraid. So they said, let's pretend he's asleep. And then they go away. And then they're called back. And finally they're persuaded to call the doctors. And by the time the doctors came, it was too late.
How old was he when he died?
1950. He would have been like upper 60s, which in those days was old.
Oh, yeah.
A little off the subject strictly of Stalin, but going back to the revolution, which I think was fall of 2009, which they said that they'd seen this movie before, referring to the United States, saying that the Democrats were the Bolsheviks and the Republicans were the Mensheviks. I wonder if you care to comment on that, and everyone knows about the Bolsheviks, but perhaps we don't know too much about the Mensheviks, and we need to.
I think whatever Pravda wrote was nonsense, so it's hard to comment on nonsense. There was a Russian Social Democratic Party, which was a united party of socialists. Lenin, in 1903, I believe, decided that he wanted to split off the Bolsheviks to make the Bolsheviks an elite party of professional revolutionaries. He didn't want a mass party. He wanted elite professional revolutionaries because he thought if you're going to make revolution, you need professionals. So that, and the Mensheviks, they continued to meet periodically. Once the Bolsheviks took power, the Mensheviks were shot. That's what happened.
Is it true that Lenin instituted the first single-payer medical system?
The question was a little subtle for me. So I have to kind of figure out what the question is. Lenin's first decree was arrest all rival party members. It wasn't, let's have socialized medicine. His second decree was Red Terror, which is go out and shoot everybody who opposes us. His Minister of Health was one of the sleaziest guys you can imagine, so there's quite a story to tell about him. But I will avoid your question.
Yes. So it seems you spend a great deal of time figuring out the patterns and the ways these things unfold. So my question is, what today in our world is the biggest threat that you see?
I think it's hard to answer the question. I think you have to look at a number of things. I think it's very important that the United States remain exceptional because that's the anchor of the world. The second thing is that we should be concerned about this clash of civilizations. The fact that Pakistan is going to hell, Afghanistan is unlikely to turn out well, Turkey, who knows which way that's going to go. So that's something to be worried about. Will China remain a one-party system is important. So it's hard for me to pick out any one thing. There are a lot of things that are going to determine our future. So I will avoid your question too.
I'm Ray Strong. Given what you know from studying dictators, particularly Stalin, what can you tell us to watch for in our own country? When would we know we have a dictator?
We know.
I'm probably more optimistic than this crowd because I'm a great admirer of the Constitution. We have had 3 years of a president who would like to take the country in a direction the majority does not want it to go. And he's not succeeding. A lot depends upon whether health care will be repealed, because that is really what he would call his major accomplishment, I would regard as the major danger. So we don't know how that story is going to turn out. I think the Constitution is such a genial document with have real danger because you don't have congressional control over them. So you have that, and then you have the czar systems. The biggest, of course, you know, what's the biggest danger for the U.S., and that is a second Obama term and a change in the Supreme Court majority. Yeah.
Dr. Gregory, thank you for your fascinating talk. There's something irresistible about the juxtaposition of romance and executions. I was reflecting, I read something recently, I wish I could identify specifically where and what, but there seems to be some criticism about Winston Churchill and his sitting at Yalta with Stalin and with Roosevelt. Any comments? Any thoughts?
I'm not an expert on this. Clearly Roosevelt was in very bad shape. I think Stalin outsmarted them all, and surprisingly he outsmarted Churchill, who was still in his prime. You know, the line between East and West was drawn arbitrarily. There's, you know, a lot of second guessing about holding back the troops, holding them back so the Russians could take Berlin. If I'd studied this in detail, I'd give you a better answer, but right now I've only made it up to about 1938.